Hello friends, I'm Joshua Day, and welcome to my studio again. And I wanted to release a video today about working on orchestral templates inside Studio One. I've been working on this lighting here, trying to get this lighting perfect for a long time. And so as I'm producing these videos over time, you're going to probably see some different camera angles, different lighting situations set up just so I can eventually get the right look and feel that I'm going for here. But this may be a little underexposed. I'm not sure. I'm doing my best, and it'll be a learning process. But hey, yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in here. So there's a lot of videos out there about making orchestral templates and what makes the best template. And there's no right or wrong answer with that. For different DAWs, Cubase, for Logic, I'm working inside Studio One. There's not a whole lot of template discussions and that kind of thing for this particular product. So I thought it might be pretty cool to talk about that. So let's just dive right in here, and I'm going to switch over to the computer here, and I have Studio One open right now, and I have it set up to a blank song. There's nothing in it right now, but I want to walk you sort of through the process of what I do whenever I want to set up an orchestral template. Orchestral templates are really good for film composing, for writing classical genre. There's a plus and minus to having an orchestral template. If you get locked into a particular template, you might it might stifle your creativity a little bit. Because you're not really using different samples, and you're not trying new things. But they also really increase workflow. And productivity, I think, in my opinion. And that's what you'll find with a lot of people who talk about them are telling you. Let's go ahead and start setting up this template. I'm not going to walk through the entire process in real time because it takes hours upon hours upon hours. I'm going to show you how to get it started. And then I'm going to dive into a template that I've already built, and I'll show you how it's routed and how it's built. So let's get started. You're inside Studio One. You have, of course, the browser, which I like to turn off whenever I am, working. It's kind of intrusive and in the way. So what I like to do first, though, even before I start dragging things over, that's the beauty of Studio One. I can just grab this BBC Symphony Orchestra right here and drag it right over into the track list over here, and it will create what I want. But I kind of like to start by defining tracks. And folders. So a really good thing to get in the habit of is to maintain organization, because you'll drive yourself crazy if you don't. Let's take a look here at what we have. I'm going to call this Orchestra, and I'm just going to create one folder. And let's drop that down to 1 and hit OK. And so you'll see now I have an orchestra folder up there. Now what I want to do inside that orchestra folder, with it selected, I'm going to create folders for all my instruments. So what do we have? We have woodwinds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add the different sections while just calling it all woodwinds, and I'll just change the name later. So let's see. My folders would be woodwinds, brass, traditional percussion, and then maybe some cinematic percussion, maybe some choir, and then strings. And then, of course, there's other things you can do too, but let's just do those 6 folders for right now. So I'm going to increase my count up to 6, and I'm going to hit OK. So now you see I have my orchestra, and I've got 6 folders. Let's go ahead and name these. Woodwinds. We're going to, instead of calling it Woodwinds 1, we're just going to call it Woodwinds. And this one we're going to call Brass. Percussion. Cinematic Percussion. And then let's maybe put a choir in there. And let's put this our string section in there. Okay. Now, I like to work with key switches, so you're not going to see me actually create another folder in here called flute and add, all the different articulations for a flute. I'm going to drop in my BBC flute. So at the core of my template, I do use the BBC Symphony Orchestra, but I have a lot of other libraries too that you'll see, and I'll go through those a little bit later. But let me go ahead and drop in a track. Let me add a track under Woodwinds. And the first track will be, not flute, but piccolo. And then I'm going to actually then name it with the name of the library, because I'm going to blend all my different libraries. So I'm going to call it Piccolo BBC. It's not going to be a folder. It's going to be an instrument, and it's going to be a new instrument. And I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so I made a mistake there because I always do that. I ended up making 6, but that's okay. Because when Studio One remembers what you did the last time. So I created 6 tracks at a time the last time, so I forgot to change that. But so I have Piccolo BBC 1 here. Let's not do that. Let's just call it BBC, Piccolo BBC. Let's change this to flute. All right, Studio One guys, if you're listening, triple tap or 5 tap should select everything. But I digress. Okay, so we're going to call this flute BBC. And then other instruments in here, maybe we want to put an ensemble, so we'll do flutes 3. 3 means 3 players. And maybe we want to do a clarinet. Let's abbreviate it, because we're going to try to make it so that when the tracks show up down here, the channels show up in the mixer, there's not a whole lot of room to write the name for the channel. So I like to kind of abbreviate things a little bit wherever I can. But let's do clarinet saw 3. And let's just do, I believe an oboe comes first before that. So let's do our oboe. Yes. Okay. So that's good. Now, let's go ahead and assign one of these an instrument. So I'm going to go ahead and take the BBC Symphony Orchestra. I'm going to drag it from the browser and land it right on the piccolo. And that's going to bring up the BBC Symphony Orchestra. It created a channel down here for my piccolo. Well, the one thing about the BBC Symphony Orchestra is it is not a multi-instrument. It is unless you have the professional version. This is core. And so core does not allow you to have a multi-instrument. So it's one instance per instrument, which can get pretty taxing on your system. I do have a really powerful computer with 128 gigabytes of RAM. So that handles the symphony orchestra very, very easily. But if you have something lesser, like 32 gigs or 64 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes should be able to handle it as well. But if you have like 32, you're going to be struggling a little bit to load all the instruments that you want to add to a big orchestral template. Okay, so we want to bring in our piccolo, which is right here. Let's load that up. Okay, so there's my piccolo, and you can hear it here. I'm going to play it a little bit. There's the piccolo. Now, I'm only going to demonstrate this one because there's a few things that I want to talk about as far as volume balancing as well goes, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So I got my piccolo in there, and it's all set to go. And what I want to do next is I have downloaded this extension called the Color Toolbar. You don't have to use that. You can assign colors to your tracks this way. And that's just fine and good. But one thing I like to do is for all libraries of a same type, and that's how I organize my template that I'm going to show you in a minute when we get to that point. But I organize them by library. So I'll have a folder not just for woodwinds, but I'll have a folder for woodwinds BBC, and then I'll have a folder for woodwinds cinewinds and the woodwinds east-west. And then I can actually color code these. So what I like to do is I like to select all these tracks, and then I will use my color toolbar here to pick maybe like a green. I don't know why I choose green. I just think it looks good for woodwinds, but there's my green. And then you can see this come in. Let me talk a little bit about busing these channels now too. So, of course, I would go through the same process for each one. I would drop in the BBC Symphony Orchestra or whatever other particular contact player or whatever that I would want on here, on each one of these channels. And then I would then bus all of my woodwinds to a channel that can control all of them, and then that would go to a reverb. So let's go ahead and call this one Piccolo. Okay. What I want to do next is I want to create a new channel. So I'm going to add a bus channel. All I did was right click on that and I created this bus channel. Now I'm going to call this bus channel Woodwinds. And I'm going to go ahead and colorize this one as being like a really dark red. I'm going to make all my bus channels dark red. And so I would do, let me see, can I just duplicate this? No, let's just add another one. Let's just say, let's call this channel brass. And let's make another one. We'll call this one percussion. And this is just for demonstration purposes. So I'm just going to, colorize those to be red again. Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about orchestral reverb and how I set that up. So in order to do that, we're going to need to put another instrument in here because I want to demonstrate the difference between the way these different libraries are recorded. So where I have here flute BBC, let's actually let's change that to east-west. And I'm going to pull in another sound source. So let me take a look through here real quick for the play VST64, X64. That's what we want. Now I don't have the Opus engine yet. I'm not sure I'm going to get it. I might pick up the East West Hollywood Orchestra Opus edition at some point, but right now I still have the play version. Let's take a look here at Orchestral Woodwinds Gold, and I'm going to go pull in a flute and pull in the flute key switch patch. That's sustain and short. Add that. Takes a minute to load. Okay, and that's in. Now I'm going to move this over here, and we're going to call this flute east-west. Now I want you to hear the difference between these two libraries. Piccolo was recorded in Maida Studios, which has kind of a dark tone to the room. And you can hear a lot of the room ambience. You can hear a lot of that when I play those short notes. You can hear that ring in the room. But the flute in East-West was it's a much drier library. So what do? We got to somehow get those two instruments sounding like they are in the same room. So what I like to do is I tend to go a little bit overboard with the reverbs. You don't have to follow this exactly. This is not the only way to do it. There's many other people that do it different ways. I may refine my reverb technique over the years as well as I continue to do this. But let me show you what my process is. I'm going to add an FX channel, and it's going to go right here. This is exactly where I want it, right before the bus channels. And let me colorize that white. And I'm going to call this one stage reverb. Okay. Now, what I want to do with that is I want to try to get this flute to sound like it belongs in the same room as this flute, just to give us all kind of the same starting place. So in order to do that, let me grab over into my effects here, and I'll look for my reverbs. See here, under East-West, I have spaces 2. Let's try that. Now, in my orchestral template that I'm going to show you in a minute, I don't use spaces as my stage reverb. I actually use Valhalla Room. But I wanted to experiment with this right now. And you notice here that I've got this set at full wet and no dry signal at all going in. That's because I'm using this as a send. Okay, so this channel is a send, and I'm using the reverb as a send. Let's take a look at my presets here, and I already kind of know where I'm going. I kind of want to get a, not necessarily a scoring stage. I could go with that, but I'm looking more for the warehouses. Acme Storage, because one of my libraries that I absolutely love, the ambient space of the sound of the room, is the Cinebrass libraries. And they are recorded at the Sony Pictures scoring stage, and it has a kind of a dark sound to it that is that way because it was converted from a warehouse. So let's see, probably about a 2-second reverb from the front reflections would be good. Pull that in. Okay, now we don't have, this is just sitting here right now. We don't have anything sent to it. So let me show you the process. We're going to take my flute from east-west, and I'm going to bus it through my woodwinds. I'm going to bus this one through my woodwinds as well. So now this channel is going here to my woodwinds channel, and I'm going to send a piece of it. I'm going to parallel process a piece of it to my my stage reverb. Hit the plus, and I choose stage reverb. Okay, now it's going here. Let me resize this a little bit. Okay, so now it's going to my stage reverb. Now let's hear what that sounds like so far. Okay, and let's hear that in comparison to the piccolo. Okay. Okay, so it's a little bit much. Let's try to dial it back just a little bit. Okay, piccolo. So I call that good for now, just for demonstration purposes. So again, what I've done is I have taken the flute and I have sent it to the woodwinds bus where it's being processed there. And I've also sent a piece of it, parallel processed it through the stage reverb that I have here. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some gluing reverbs. And well, first, before I do that, let me go ahead and actually, I want to send a little bit of this through the stage reverb as well, but not as much, because remember, the piccolo is fine. Just to trick the listener's ear a little bit, we want a little piece of that flute going into the same reverb. A little piece of the piccolo going into the same reverb. Okay. Still very very clear sounding because the it's like a little bit more close mic in it, and I can fix that later on, and I'll show you my full template that I have fixed that. But you can hear it sounds really good together now. They both sound like they belong in the same space almost. They're almost there. And it's just a lot of volume balancing that's left to do. Okay, let's go ahead now and add in the gluing reverbs. So I'll add another FX channel. I'm going to take that one, I'm going to move it over here. And now let's say that this is our woodwinds. Okay, and we'll have another another FX channel. I may call it VFX because I'm also in the video world a little bit, so I apologize if I do that. These are FX channels, effects channels, basically. I'm going to add a brass. And then, let's see, maybe do a perk reverb. Okay, so why do I do that? Let's make these white real quick. For my gluing reverbs, what I like to do is I like to have the reverb impulse response was recorded where the section exists in the orchestra. So my first reverb was, the only purpose for that was to get all the instruments to sound like they belong in the same room. The gluing reverbs are for the sake of the track. At the end of the day, what you want is your track to all kind of mesh together. And these final reverbs that you put on your track are going to take all the sounds, and it's going to just kind of blend them all together, so you can't really hear the differences between the libraries anymore. So first reverb is to get everything in the same room. Second set of reverbs are for track finishing purposes. So what I'll do in this case, I'm going to put east-west spaces on this as well. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into instrument-specific tour under the presets here. Let's go to instrument-specific tour, and I'm going to look for, let's see, orchestral woodwinds. There we go. Now we'll look at the Southern California Hall winds, and this is front reflections. This is good. So you'll notice in east-west spaces that with the Southern California Hall, they have all different reverbs. The impulse response is recorded in different sections of the orchestra. So like there's one for brass, there's one for woodwinds, there's one for percussion. It just adds that layer of realism with, like your early reflections bouncing off the right a little bit more because the instrument's positioned on the left in real life. It's just really cool like that. So that's what I do is I'll assign like the Southern California Hall to each one of these reverb FX channels. So let me load that in place. And now what I'll do is I'll take the woodwinds. So if I have both flute, clarinet, and say all of my woodwinds are now being processed into the woodwinds bus, I can take the entire woodwinds bus now and I can send it to the reverb through the woodwinds reverb. So let me go ahead and say this, we're not going to change because this is going to go to our main out. That is our final output bus right here. Under sends, I'm going to choose woodwinds reverb. And now when I play either of these, we should also be getting the woodwinds reverb sound. Okay, and then the flute. Aside from the flute sounding like it's a little bit closer to you, the reverb tails are starting to sound very similar. And everything's starting to gel and glue together, which is exactly what you want. Okay, let's go on to the template that I've built next, and I'll show you the finished product. Okay, and we're back. But through the magic of the internet, that was probably immediate for you. That took me probably about 5 minutes to load up my template. So, what are we talking about now? I have built this template, and it took me a long time. I've been working on this template probably for over a month. I don't recommend you spend a month working on a template and not making music, but I digress. Anyway, I was just trying to make this template as perfect as I possibly can. Let's take a look at it real quick. You will see that what I have up top here is I have a folder called feature. What I want to do is I want to be able to have, like, when you go to a concert, you might have a front band. You might have some soloists, instrumentalists up front that are playing drums, that are playing electric guitars, basses, acoustic instruments, and the synths, that sort of thing. So that's what that's for. And then the orchestra would be kind of like the backing band. So I have that scenario kind of set up here. So the feature folder, then I have the orchestra folder, and inside the orchestra folder, of course, is all of my tracks. And I've set these all up. Now I have broken them apart, like I'd mentioned to you before, that the woodwinds are broken up by by the brand of sample library that I use. So woodwind soloists from Orchestral tools. These are absolutely gorgeous instruments. Absolutely beautiful. The Orchestral tools, instruments, these are from the Soloists library, Soloists 1 and 2. And so you can see I've color-coded them as well. So they're color-coded with like that light green up here. Then my next library is a regular green, a little bit darker for the woodwinds from the east-west, and a little bit darker from the woodwinds from Cinewinds. At the core of my template, I have BBC Symphony Orchestra, as I mentioned before, but I do like to blend other libraries in. And I just threw everything but the kitchen sink I threw at this thing. So I've got flute soloist, and I've got flutes, multiple flutes playing together. I might hear some clicks and pops, and it's because I am, it's 128 gigabytes of RAM, but still, this thing probably chews up about 80 gigabytes of that memory, and then I've got OBS running as well. So then I've got my flutes, then oboe, clarinet, bassoon. Everything's in score order. All the libraries from East West. Now remember, we were talking about reverb. Now listen, East West was very dry, remember? But now listen to how it sounds here. Sounds like it's in the same space as this oboe. Right? So using the combination of those reverbs, I was able to get that. And I'll show you that mix in just a minute. But let's go through the instrumentation that I have in here. I'm pulling in, this is really cool. I'm going to show you this in a moment. I also have, I have brass from the BBC Symphony Orchestra at the core, and then I have brass from Cinebrass. And I do have brass from East West as well that I have disabled. And I've actually turned that off so that it just decreases load times. And you can do that. You can go into your track list. I just opened up the inspector over there. And if I scroll all the way up to my brass, you'll see that I've got some dimmed ones out right here. And these are just disabled tracks. If I was to turn this on and then hit enable, you would see those tracks appear down here underneath tuba, CB. My naming convention, again, as I've said, is I say the name of the instrument and then I give it the initials of the library that it's from, so that I know where I'm pulling these instruments from. These instruments are absolutely beautiful. The trumpet, some of the brass instruments from BBC are a little bit darker and more well suited for classical playing. Okay, and then the brass from Cinebrass are a little bit more grating, a little bit more brassy for really brilliant, heroic passages. Okay, and then one of my favorites is the bass trombone with this cimbasso. Really, really cool patch. So up top, I've got something interesting. I really like this. Now, let's hope that the interface loads. And it did. Good. This is V-horns. V-horns is awesome. And now I mentioned that the interface might not load. Sometimes this loads in blank with the UVI workstation. It's some kind of a bug with Studio One. But if you just reload Studio One, it should reappear. These are my soloist instruments. Now, this is a sample modeled. I'm trying to think what the best way to describe it would be. They took samples of an actual player playing the trumpet, but then they modeled the rest of the nuances of it, like a synthesizer. And it's a very realistic interpretation, I think. So yeah, very, very cool. And it also, having this allows me to also have like a flugelhorn patch. Flugelhorn 2 is really pretty. Very, very gorgeous instruments. For the sake of time, this video is going to end up being really, really long. But you can see how I've stacked all these things. I think it's very important that you do organization. So again, you saw up here I've got my woodwinds. Under orchestra, I've got my woodwinds, I've got my brass, I've got my each of my libraries organized by folder track, and then, of course, all the instruments inside there. And they're in score order. Just look that up in score order. You've got your trumpets, high instruments down to the bass instruments. I don't have any French horns in the V horns. So I do have here, like you'll see horn, then I've got multiple horns, trumpets, trombones, bass trombones, tuba. Same thing going on here. I've got my horn. I've got 2 horns. Why do I do that? Say you have 6 players. You want to simulate 6 players. And then you want to do a 3-note chord. Well, what you do is you bring up your 2 horns patch and you divide that up by 3. So you can play a triad on your 2 horns patch, and it will create all 6 of your players playing a triad, playing a chord. And then if I wanted to have all my horns in unison, you know, most orchestras only have maybe like 4 horns or maybe 6 horns. And I've got the stopped versions here too. And rips. That's pretty fun. There are some crazy orchestras though that will, especially for film scores, they'll bring in 12 horns. So here's 12 horns, just so you can hear it. I'll talk a little bit about volume balancing as well. I mentioned that in the beginning of this video. And when you're volume balancing, you want to be careful to not make the brass instruments sound quieter than the woodwinds and things like that. I'll talk about a little bit more a little bit later, but even in the middle of the sections as well, if you have a single horn, he's not going to be as powerful as 12 horns. So you don't want to, like I've got my level meter over here that you can kind of see. If I kind of shrink it down a little bit, hang on one second, just grab it and shrink it down a little bit. So you can see here on my leveling meter where these guys come up. If I play one horn, he's right around 0. This is not 0 dB. This is I'm using a K20 meter right now. So it just helps me to make sure that I leave myself enough headroom for the master. That's a topic for another day. But you can see that the horn, when I play it by itself, now that did spike a little bit there, but that's because the circumfrequency in that particular recording is extremely, extremely loud. And probably needs to be tamed with some compression. But that should not be as loud as my horns A12 for my 12 horn patch. See? You need to make sure that you volume balance the sections in such a way that it sounds realistic. So moving on from the brass, let's talk about the percussion that I have in here. I'm using the BBC Symphony Orchestra for like my timpani and whatnot, cymbals, snares, and then triangle and all that kind of good stuff. Percussion toys, anvil. Anvil's fun. That's neat. If you ever heard the Iron Man theme for Iron Man 3, you hear that da-da-da-dum, doom, da-da-da-dum, doom, where they're pounding on that anvil. Traditional percussion, I've got another library here. This is Damage 2, which I absolutely love. The snares in there are pretty epic. Yeah, so I have these in here because I just like them. They just sound really, really cool to me. Those are toms. And of course the bass drums. Different types of bass drums. This bass drum up on higher C, I think it's C4. I've programmed that in to be, have a little bit more punch to it. The way I've set up these too, this is not a video all about how to set up damage, but I've created ensembles for each of these patches. The ensemble designer. We're looking right now at the Piatti, which is a crash cymbal, and I've set them up on a stage, and different types of crash cymbals. And we were just looking at the bass drum. Let me see if I can find it here. That's the gong, low snare, all toms. Here's the bass drum. So all my bass drums are over here, but I have different types of bass drums that I've kind of all clustered together there. East West has a really good mark tree, sleigh bells. If I can find them, there they are. Yep. And then I even have this little snare from Garrett and Personal Orchestra. Garrett and Personal Orchestra was my first orchestral library. I don't use it much anymore because the sound quality is not really there, but I bring it in here for its snares off sound. I like the snares off sound. I have a drum kit. You know, so for any kind of like rock type stuff that I want to put in with my orchestra. Cinematic percussion is so much fun. Then I have my clickies. These are all different sounds that I just kind of split out from the ensemble designer within Damage, and I just broke them apart into the different tracks. So then you have your sticks. Medals. Trash cans. And then all these other things down here, darbukas. And then the alfeas. Surdos are fun. Chinese toms are awesome. Especially when paired with the regular toms. And then taikos. Taiko ensemble. Very fun. I have a master sessions on ethnic ensemble in here too, just for simple stuff. After the percussion in the score order, you have their tune percussion, your harps and keys, and I've got a choir in here as well. I've got my Glock. Not the weapon, not the gun, it's a glockenspiel. Tubular bells. Xylophone, vibraphone, marimba. Marimba's pretty. My Celeste sounds a lot like a Glock. That might be a little too loud. I might want to volume balance that one down just a little bit. And then my harp. This is a harp from Cineharps, which is absolutely gorgeous. And then the same thing from the harp BBC. And I've panned that one a little bit to the right side of the orchestra. So I have a harp on the left and a harp on the right. And of course my piano. I love the Ravenscroft 217 UVI piano, which is what this one is. Very, very beautiful. That sits really well in the orchestral mix. I have a choir in here. This is the East West Hollywood Choir, which if you look at these patches here, the S words, A words, T words, and B words are all the word builder. And they all sing. If you listen maybe to the sopranos, they're singing A New Beginning. And I can change those words to whatever I want. I can go into the word builder and I can put a new phrase in there and it will sing whatever I want it to say. It just doesn't sound always as realistic as a real thing, of course. It's meant to just kind of blend into the mix and sit there in the background and sound really good. And I also have my choir vowels. Some noise patches in there, so you can actually get some R's, like double R trills, like brrr, and shh, and breath noises and things like that. String soloist. Let's take a minute to take a look at some of these. This is the Joshua Bell violin, which is absolutely gorgeous. One thing I like to do with my soloists is I like to bring them up front, or I like to blend them in. Maybe I'll blend them into the full string sound to maybe create a little bit of that more close mic'd type sound. But if you listen to Joshua Bell violin, this is gorgeous as well. And then I've got a viola here as well. This one is from So Joshua Bell violin is from Embertone. The viola is from Best Service. I'm not sure exactly what the brand is on it, but it's really pretty. It's called Emotional Viola. And of course, Tina Guo cello from Cinesamples. Now, let me talk about this section in a minute. Let's go down here to my BBC strings, your violins, 1. Very, very pretty. Violins, 2. Put them 2 together. And then cellos, basses, violas, all in score order. To talk about the Divisi strings, though, I have a section here called Divisi strings. Now, this is not a Divisi library. This is actually Spitfire's chamber strings. And what I've done is I set them up so that I can actually, if I want to create Divisi, I can. So listen, here's 16 players. That's what this number means right here. Violins 1, 16 players on the BBC. Now here, I've divided this up. So this is violins 4. These are 4 players. Now, I can duplicate this. Now I have 8 players. And the way you do this, so you don't get kind of a phasing effect, is you go in and under violins, and here's violins, and here's violins. Let me open it up. Okay. So here's violins 1, A1. And there's no extra functionality here. But on A2, part A2, I've actually transposed this up to, and then transposed it down to. And that what it does, it's pulling another sample so that there's no phasing and no really weird sound that you get whenever you have 2 samples that are exactly the same playing together. And so it's really hard to explain, actually, but I'm going to try. I'm trying to, with my parts here, equal the number of players, or get close to it, that I have in the BBC Symphony Orchestra. So, in theory, if I take 16 players and I put part A, if I take, I have 8 players, here's A1 and A2, that's 8 players, all playing part A. And then I have part B, which is another line, and that's another 8 players. So here's Divisi B1 and B2, same kind of deal. I can put like the second part for a Divisi on these 2 instruments here, and then I will have a total of 16 players playing, and they will be separated. The parts will be split. It's a really, really technical thing to try to explain, but these 4 instruments here, part A and part B, divided up in 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, should equal about the sound of like 16 different violin players playing. And you're going to hear a little bit of phasing going on here, but it should sound pretty similar. That compared to this. It's not exact. It's not exact. But in a mix, you'll never be able to tell. Then last but not least, under here, I have a folder for sketches. And these are my sketching pianos. Those help me just to come up with ideas. And so I have 3 of them so that I can actually do maybe I'll do some runs on this one to like say, this is the way I want to do the woodwinds. And then down here, I'll have more chords playing. So maybe down here, what I'll do is I'll have on this one, I'll have a bass line going. And that just helps me figure out what I want to do with the orchestra. And of course, last but not least, I have a track down here for throwing in an audio reference so that I can just make sure that my orchestra is sounding real. Let's talk a little bit about the routing again. We talked about the reverb once before. And let me show you what's going on here. So you can see I've got all of my woodwinds. They are all going to the woodwinds bus channel. You can see here it's listed here, woodwinds bus. And all the way down here is my woodwinds bus. Okay. Now I'm going to swing back. Flutes east-west is a very dry library like we heard before. If I did not have this on, you still hear kind of the hall reverb I have going on. Okay, so I turn my stage reverb back on. And that just makes the east-west library, like I said, sound like it's in the same room as the other libraries that I'm trying to blend in. And so that's sending to the stage, and it's also going to the woodwinds bus. So it's being parallel processed to stage reverb and woodwinds bus. Everything that goes into stage is going to come out in main, I believe. Yep. So that reverb's being processed. So the stage reverb is going to main, and the woodwinds library is receiving the dry signal from the woodwinds, from each of the woodwinds individual sample libraries. And then from there, it's being processed by another hall reverb. And each of these, so you have going to the winds hall, brass hall, perk hall, cineperk hall, harps hall, choir hall, strings hall. You don't necessarily have to go this crazy, but I have chosen to. So again, the bus channels, they're each going to their own reverb, and they're also being parallel processed as they go to the main out. Okay. And then I have a finishing verb on here that I am not touching yet. I don't have a reverb loaded in here because I may or may not want it. So that's a decision I'll make as I compose a song. And then also, okay, so this is a VCA channel right here. And all it is a remote control for all the final reverbs. If I want to mute them all at once, I can just do that. Or I can actually increase or lower, raise them or lower them all together. On each of the reverbs too, in order to make sure that the mix doesn't get muddy, what I've done is I've placed an EQ that actually knocks out some of the bass buildup down here, as well as some of the high frequencies, so that it doesn't just sound like a wash. That's one thing I don't want to have happen. I don't want the instruments all to just kind of blend and not be able to not to have any kind of definition at all. And also bass frequencies tend to build up like nobody's business. So you want to make sure you cut some of those back. In fact, one thing I will do after I'm done mixing an entire track is I'll go back to each of these instruments, and I have an EQ on it. Let's go back to our trusty horns patch here. Let me find it up here in the track inspector, horns CB. Let me open up the horns EQ, play a little something. You see all the energy that was right there? All that energy you can't hear. You can't hear it. But when that all builds up, it messes with your compressors, it messes with your reverbs, and it messes with your tonal balance. So what I like to do is I like to just, and I learned this too. This is not something that is unique to me. I'm not saying this for the first time. But I watched some YouTube videos, and some of the pros do this. All the pros do this, really. You do a low cut right here, maybe chop it about 18 or more. It can be a little more harsh with it. Maybe not that harsh, maybe about 30 dB per octave or 24. And now when I play that, look, here's the fundamental. There's the fundamental. That's what's making the sound of the horn. You're not hearing anything below that, really. It's just room noise. So I just pull this back to the fundamental. Okay, now if I'm playing lower, there's the fundamental right here. So the goal with this process is not to... it is to be careful not to lose the the quality and the tonality of the instrument so that it no longer sounds like the instrument that it is. It's just to get rid of that room rumble so that you don't have all these extra bass frequencies building up, except for maybe your instruments like an electric bass or synth bass, or maybe your low strings, low cellos, low trombones, bass trombones, tubas, that kind of thing. Those instruments are supposed to live down in here, but with a lot of their fundamental frequencies. But there's so much buildup down here when you have a flute with room noise. You don't need it. Chop it off. Okay, so let's talk a minute about these events that I've already pre-recorded in here before I've even saved the template out. These are automation clips, and what I've done is I've recorded automation in ahead of time so that everything kind of just starts on the same page. I can always just put the playhead back here to the very beginning, and hit stop twice, and then hit the space bar, and it will then automatically set all my levels the way I want them. If you look at one of these guys, it's just a little twiddle right here of the knobs for a modulation or whatever else. Now, if we take a look here on my desk, I have this icon iControls controller fader box, and I've set these to a few different parameters that are pretty common for Spitfire libraries, for East-West, and for my other sample libraries that I use, BBC Symphony Orchestra, that's Spitfire. And so this one is set to CC2, and then this one is set to CC11, I believe. This one's CC1, expression modulation. And then this one is set to CC21, which also controls vibrato in some Spitfire libraries. And so basically all I do is if I go back to my display for a second, and we'll go back to turn the editing off. Let's say I was just to take some of these away just for now, so you could, I could demonstrate this for you, because you can do this to the entire orchestral template in one go, except there's some instruments that don't work with CC11 and 1. It won't matter. You can program those things in there, but you'll never have to use them. And you have to be careful. In some East-West libraries, like East-West Raw and East-West Silk, the modulation control actually controls the filter instead of the dynamic layers. And so in that case, you'll roll you'll put your modulation all the way up, and it'll actually almost make it sound like there's no sound, because the filter control is all the way engaged, and it's cutting away just about everything. But anyway, here, let me go ahead now, and I'll select each of these tracks, and let's see, I guess I just select one, and then I just arm each of them. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit record, and I'm just going to twiddle those 4 knobs real quick. And let's see, I'll show you the camera of it. And I'm going to hit record. Okay, back to my display. And what I did was, when I recorded that, it made these tracks, of course, these events. And I'm going to take all of them, and I'm just going to walk them back a little bit so that they're not all sticking out like that. All right, and you'll see when that happened, what it did was it created these lanes for me, modulation. There's a kind of a bug right now with some sample libraries in Studio One that, here's CC11, which should have gone to expression. It should have made it an expression lane, but it's not working quite right within Studio One. But anyway, this is your CC11. This is your expression. It made modulation, CC02, CC21, and those lanes are now ready for me to work. Let's talk now about saving. So once you're done and you're happy with your template the way you have it, turn off the editor. All you do is you go up here and File, Save as Template, and then you'll get this information here. You can add a name for it. Like I could call this Composing Template. Sorry, I'm bumping my microphone. okay, and then give it a description that can be anything, and then you can give it an icon. Now, I do like to put some icons in here. There are some that I have that are kind of fun. Like on my hard drive, I have one for my hammer dulcimer, piano, violin. Here's the violin small. I open that up and it goes right in there like that. And then if you want to replace an existing template, you just go here and hit replace existing and go through that process. But otherwise, you can hit OK and it will save it out. And it'll be available to you in your templates list. So whenever you start a new song, you can start from a template. And then this will be available. One final note about this. One thing I do recommend is that you do volume test your orchestra. So you can take a score. There's a lot of classical scores and stuff like that out there available in PDF format on the internet, or you can get some from John Williams, buy them online. It's good. They're good to study as well. You know, you get your scores and then you can study them and learn how to do proper orchestration. But what you would do is you would create a mock-up of that piece by just entering the notes into the different tracks, and then play it back, and then go down to your reference of track that I have at the bottom there, and bring in a reference of the actual mastered recording of that same segment of music. And you can find that you can find them on YouTube and record them in, or you can rip them from CDs, just save them for personal use. Don't distribute them. There's some shady gray area there with that. But get your reference track, put it in the reference part, and then A/B compare them. Compare your orchestra sample library recording with the mastered recording. And of course, if you have reduced your levels, your level meter here, and say that your orchestra is only hitting right about here in your final mix. If I was on my true peak meter, maybe I'd be hitting probably down here around -12 with all this extra headroom. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to reduce the volume on the track of the master reference so that it matches, okay? Because you're creating a mix right now. You're not creating a final master. The mastered track is always going to be louder. So you want to make sure that you make sure your volume balances are right. And you're not blasting your master and thinking, oh no, I've got to really beef up my orchestra and make it sound louder. No, you don't. Lower the master so that your sample libraries are hitting at the same, and the master are hitting about the same spot with your audio reference. And then once you've done that, just make some tweaks to your various instruments, and then you'll be able to volume balance based on what you hear, and then you'll get a much closer realistic result that'll sound much closer to the way professional recordings sound. So that is my orchestral template. That's kind of like the fundamentals of how to build one, and I hope you really enjoyed that. If you did, why don't you like and subscribe to the channel? I'm going to be uploading more videos. And again, if you're new here, I'm Joshua Day. But just thank you so much for watching, and I just hope you have a great day. Enjoy making music.